Watch a kid play the video game What Remains of Edith Finch, and they'll tell you it's a messed up story about a cursed family. And honestly, for a while, that's the version I'd have handed you too. A family that is brilliant and talented in every aspect, but crushed by their own demons. A very beautiful cursed tragedy. Except that version falls apart the longer you sit with it. You watch an adult play this game, and the pattern matching starts almost immediately. It's not really about a curse. It's a lot of very familiar stories, just told in the costume of a curse. So, case in point, I think I know this family's curse because it's very similar to one that infects my family as well. It's called living in the Pacific Northwest. When you have like completely irrationally hot summers, you have days that go completely dark by 4 p.m., and then you have 8 months of overcast skies a year. Seasonal depression is built right into the zip code. Except the more that I played, the less I started to joke about this. Not like in a bad way, but the game is set literally 90 minutes from my actual house, this actual house. And my 12-year-old just finished the game as part of their video game summer reading program. See this video. And I want to tell you about what she said about it, because her reaction and thoughts spawned everything that you're going to see for the next 40 plus minutes. Also, for my non-gaming audience who keep this channel afloat 9 months out of the year, despite this being a video game about the final moments of an entire family, including a 2-year-old, this isn't a horror game. At least, not that kind of horror. That's the point. No monsters, no jump scares. It's just sad and plausible in the way that life actually gets. The scariest stuff was never the dramatic, it was the mundane. A bath left unattended for 90 seconds, a swing that was pushed a little bit too high, a hunting trip that goes the way that hunting trips sometimes go. So you're Edith, 17 years old, the last living Finch, standing back in front of her house that her family sealed shut years ago. Every room inside is basically a shrine. You walk through and you live out each relative's final moment, one door at a time. And before you even get through the front door, this place would make Sarah Winchester of the infamous Winchester Mystery House fame, it would make her genuinely jealous. It's that kind of architecturally unhinged, stacked on itself sprawl that would also get OSHA, CPS, and the HOA all showing up on the same day, pitchforks and torches included. So here is a primer of this infamous family. The Finches were gifted, genuinely imaginative, genuinely creative people, and this ends up being the thing that kills them. Lewis will daydream himself out of his own life. Milton vanishes into his own artwork, never to be seen again. There's Barbara, a child horror movie actress who dies a horror movie death. It's not that they were brilliant at everything and tragedy struck anyway. It's a lot more stranger and sadder than that. The same faculty that makes them gifted is the faculty that kills them. And the game always tells you how each Finch died, but it wraps every single death in a sense of whimsy and wonder. So here's how it starts. 1937, Odin Finch buries his wife and his newborn son, decides the family is cursed, and to escape it, he does something that is completely reasonable. He puts the entire house on a boat in Norway and sails it to the Orcas Islands in the Pacific Northwest. 40-foot waves capsize the house right as it arrives. He drowns before he's even off his houseboat. This blending of truth and myth gives us the story of a guy who forced his wife and kids onto a boat, sailed across the Salish Sea to the Pacific Northwest just to end up on a little group of islands called Orcas. And the second that they said house from Norway sank off the Orcas, something in me just lights up like a smoke detector. Like I said in the beginning, I live 90 minutes away from this island. I've taken that ferry. Something here doesn't add up. So to investigate, I grabbed my wife and kids and I forced them onto a ferry that sailed across the Salish Sea. Okay, god damn it. And I didn't stop at that ferry. I went to the top of Mount Constitution, the highest point in the entire San Juan Islands. There's a stone watchtower up there, finished in 1936. That is a year before Odin supposedly sailed and drowned in 40-foot waves right off this coast. And to top it off, you can see it for yourself. This is calm, sheltered inland water. There's no open ocean out here to sink a house. Also, to Seattle by sea is 12,166 nautical miles through the Panama Canal. 50 days at sea. The actual Norwegian immigrants who came to this exact corner of Washington, they didn't sail dramatically, they came by Atlantic steamer, then a transcontinental train. That house would have arrived as pieces of lumber by the time that it would have gotten to the San Juans. Anyways, there's a point to all of this, I promise. The likeliest real story is that a man who drowned crossing a short, calm stretch of water, and then 4 generations of his family turned it into a Viking funeral. The founding legend doesn't even survive a cursory glance at a map. That's the first sign that whatever this family tells you is it's a myth. Like, his name is even Odin. He didn't just die crossing the water, he turned himself into a legend. Gone right when his family needed him. And he wasn't even the last Finch to pull that move. Milton, the kid who vanishes into his own artwork, has an ending worth a detour, and it's been developer confirmed. In a Giant Sparrow Reddit AMA, Ian Dallas said Milton grows up to become the king in the studio's earlier game, The Unfinished Swan. In that game's own ending, the king confirms he's the father of its protagonist, a boy named Monroe. He painted himself a companion instead of earning one, got that companion pregnant, ew, and left without a trace, double ew. And after his mother dies, Monroe grows up in an orphanage, never knowing his father at all. Ooh, it's the identical move, 1 generation over. Milton escapes the Finch house to build a family his own way and ends up just repeating Odin's mistakes. Rather than be a father, he becomes a legend, reachable only as a legend. And Monroe has to walk through an entire painted myth just to find him at all. He inherits the same wound the way that every Finch grandchild does. Not the truth, but a fairy tale that he has to excavate for himself. So Giant Sparrow built this second engine into a second, technically unrelated family. That's either an authorial signature or proof that this pattern isn't unique to just the Finches. We have a family that flees a curse by shipping the wound across an ocean. And I mean, I feel like I've been here before. 2 years ago, I argued that Elden Ring was about inherited trauma. Gods shattering a world just to deny death. Every child inheriting that wound differently. You have a matriarch who chooses myth over honest grief. You have sealed rooms standing in for repression. A death tree that is the family tree. Elden Ring is the demigod, conquest, and magic version of all this. Finch does it in the quietest key that there is. There's no villains, no thrones, nothing at stake, but just a family in a damp house. It's the same wound. One screamed it, the other just talked in a normal room voice. If that rhymes for you and you want to see the full argument, check out the video when you're done with this one. But for now, let's go back to the Finch house. So before I go further, 2 things. I'm not going to walk through every single family member who dies in this house. Partly for time, but mostly because a full catalog isn't the point. This isn't 1001 ways for a kid to die. And the deeper reason, and I'll say it straight instead of like performing it, like I've spent about 13 years now as a parent running worst case scenario reels in my own head on a loop. And by the time that I sat down and played this entire game behind me, I've already watched enough real horror happen in the actual real world that like a kid drowning in a bathtub because a parent looked away for a minute doesn't land and hit the same way that it would when this game came out in 2017. That's not a flex, it's just a very unflattering real thing about modern parenthood. I worry about my kids not coming home from school about as much as I worry about them flying off a swing into the sky, which is more than I probably should. So we have one wound that is carried a few totally different ways. And I don't think of these as like a ladder towards some magical solution. No one here is doing anything right. They're just different distortions of the same emotional inheritance. And it's really in watching them stacked against each other that this argument starts to kind of formulate. Let's start with 2 that look like total opposites but run in the exact same circuitry, fight or flight. So Calvin's 11 and he always wanted to fly. His memorial in this house is literally an astronaut helmet. His big sister Barbara died about a year before, and in that grief and in that loss, that turns his dream into a decision. He stops wanting to fly someday and makes up his mind to do it that day. Off a swing at the edge of a 300-foot cliff, a cast still on his leg. And to go through with it, his choice isn't just, I won't be afraid anymore. It's more specific and more damaged than that. He has to shut off both the feeling of fear and the survival function underneath it. The part of a brain that's supposed to warn you away. That's supposed to warn you away from the drop. That's flight. Pushed all the way down past its own logical end. Not fleeing a place, but fleeing the warning itself. And his twin brother kept the proof. On Sam's side of the room, they shared as kids 2 photographs of that swing hung for the rest of his life. One from right before Calvin let go, one from right after. The swing broken empty. My own kids watched this part over my eldest shoulder. When Calvin sailed off on that swing, they laughed. They were completely shocked. And my 8-year-old, inappropriate reaction, completely firing on all cylinders, just immediately started singing, I believe I can fly. And that's not them missing the point. The game's own designer built that reaction in on purpose. He described it as a joyful inevitability. Scenes built to be playful and interesting while marching happily towards their doom. Like, my kids knew that Calvin was going to die. The laugh is how a kid actually processes it. Walter, their younger brother, goes fight. Barbara was babysitting him the night that she died. Whatever actually happened in that house, the game keeps it ambiguous, but I think it was the boyfriend. But Walter went missing in the middle of it, and by the time anyone found him, his sister didn't come back. That's what sends him underground in the first place. A year later, his brother Calvin goes too. And 4 years after Barbara, his father dies as well. On Walter's own 12th birthday, building him a present he may never have even gotten to see finished. Damn. By then, Walter had already been down in that bunker for years. 30 plus years later, he's still fighting the exact same threat, just by building something it can never get through. A bunker, underground, alone, eating peaches while a calendar spins past him. Millions of peaches for Walter. The exact opposite of Calvin's move. Walling the danger out completely instead of launching himself at it. Because the best offense is always a good defense. But they're not opposites. That exact defense that they build is what kills them. Calvin threw his fear away, so at the edge of that cliff, that one moment he needed it, there was nothing left to say stop. Walter shielded himself off for 30 years, and the day that it came down, the world that he had been starved for is a train that he never heard coming. And then there's Lewis the Daydreamer, probably one of the most infamous segments of this game. He breaks the fight or flight pattern completely because his distortion is neither one, it's a straight split. And like I said, I think that this vignette explains why so many adults resonate with this game as hard as they do. Specifically, adults who aren't boomers, who didn't inherit a lot of the boomer stuff. You spend your whole life hearing about how other generations before you had these amazing legacies and legends that they were able to build. Odin being the perfect example of this. And what happens when you're at the same age? You're in a cannery, raw dogging life, completely sober, doing the same motion for 8 hours a day. Knife goes in, guts come out. Knife goes in, guts come out. Repeat, repeat, repeat. His vignette runs on 2 control sticks at once. The left one drives a fantasy hero version of himself in third person, adventuring through a kingdom that he's built entirely in his own head. The right drives his actual body, or his actual hand, on a cannery line. Throughout the story, the fantasy bubble grows. Not metaphorically, the game genuinely lets it swallow more and more of the screen, until one day, he decides to simply forget to go home. Lewis's own words, the one his psychiatrist quotes back in that letter, "My imagination is as real as my body." And I think that there is something in there in almost anyone who's ever worked a job that they hated while carrying around a bigger idea in their head. Like, we've all heard the story of a creative person who was stuck in some dead-end job with an idea that they couldn't shake, and they finally take a leap of faith and it pays off. It's so easy to look at Lewis and see that same type of person. One decision away from writing that world down and actually getting out. And like, I would call his kingdom amateur. And I don't mean that in like the it's not very good sense. I mean like literally amateur. What Lewis was doing in his head is exactly what hundreds of thousands of people are doing right now for fun. Doing things like running solo RPG campaigns, world building for a novel they'll probably never finish, DMing a game for their friends on a Tuesday night. It's real, legitimate creative labor, and given the knowledge, given the outlet, this guy could have been one hell of a dungeon master. And like, that itself to me is part of the tragedy. Not that his gift was small, he just never got the chance to find an outlet that even existed. He didn't need to become a next Brandon Sanderson in order to be saved. I think he just really needed a sense of community, really just a table, if anything. And I'll touch on why I think that is here in a little bit. But first, I want to touch on, I guess, who I think might be, weirdly enough, the most relatable character in this whole game. And that's Sam. Sam, Calvin's twin brother, sits dead center in this family tree. And he's the only one who's actually tried. Where Edie, the family's matriarch, mythologizes death, turning it into stories, into shrines, into a dragon. Sam does the opposite. He tries to confront it directly. He's got more reason to than the game spells out. By the time that he's a teenager, he's already lost his older sister, his own twin brother, and his father. 3 deaths in 4 years, all before he's 15. And his little brother isn't dead, technically. He's just, entombed in a bunker under the same house for the rest of Sam's entire adult life. So here's my own reading of that, not something that the game states outright. I think that's exactly the kind of math that sends a person into the Marines. If the men in your family keep dying to things that nobody sees coming, there's a logic to wanting your own death, if it ever comes to that, to at least mean something. He's coded as a survivalist after that. Military background, hunting gear filling his room, all of it read through the space itself rather than a cutscene. So once he is an adult, he leaves his house, starts his own family away from all of it, and he raises his daughter Dawn to look death in the eye instead of hiding from it. The fatal hunting trip that he takes his daughter on isn't cruelty. It's meant to be a lesson to her about life and about death. And this time he's not a bystander to it. Sam and his wife Kay have a second son named Gregory. And one night while Kay's giving him a bath, Sam keeps calling the house phone. She steps out more than once to answer it. And somewhere during one of those gaps, a toy frog that Gregory is playing with bumps the tap back on, and the tub starts to fill up. Kay and Sam divorce not long after. The game leaves the connection between the two events pretty implicit, but I mean, it's not subtle. He remarries eventually, but never has any more kids, and I guess this is the part where I'm probably projecting myself onto him, but I don't blame him. This is exactly what you would expect from a man who's already buried this many people, and he doesn't want to find out what losing one more of his loved ones would do to him. And I'm sorry, it has to be said, this is a rough-looking 33, and this is coming from someone who's turning 36. If you look closely at Sam's memorial, there's actually a photo of a very young Dawn on that exact same swing. The same one that his brother Calvin died on. But this time, Sam is standing there right next to Dawn, watching. Not only is he supervising his daughter, like any decent parent would be this time, unlike previous Finches, he's also making sure that his brother's death doesn't get a second chance. And ironically enough, Dawn grows up and inherits that exact same vigilance whole. Years later, she's the one standing guard on that same instinct. This time though, it's over Edith. Sam's vignette plays out through a camera. It's actually his own father's old camera, refurbished and handed down to him. He wanted photographs, so his kids would remember him. It's the honest medium. It's the opposite of Edie's myth-making. It's pointed straight at reality instead of dressing it up. And the mechanism, I think, is the key to this entire family. The attempt at a cure ends up becoming part of the next wound. The hunting trip that is meant to teach Dawn fearlessness is the exact same trip where Sam dies, on the self-timer in the same frame as his daughter, and from the deer that he made her shoot. The memorial photo and the death itself are the same shutter click. His spiritual medicine, taken straight, has become his daughter's poison, and Dawn becomes his total opposite. She ends up sealing every room in the house and forbids anyone from telling the family history again. And even the medium of a photograph doesn't survive contact with what happens to it afterwards. Like, think about it. One photograph has 3 different meanings across one life. You have the camping trip with Dad, the day that she was forced to take a life, and the day that she lost her father forever. A photograph is literally a still image, but it never holds the same meaning no matter how many times you look at it. You'd think Edith is the one who breaks the cycle. She reopens the house, she tells the stories out loud again, the game is named after her, but she's the latest unreliable narrator in a very long line of them. And what she's carrying when she walks back in is the reason. Her mother, Dawn, died a few months before this game even starts. Not a dragon, not a swing, just cancer. That ordinary dragon cancer, that illness that got a little bit better, a little bit worse, then it ended. And Dawn was the one Finch who fought hardest to kill that whole sense of mythology. The one who would literally seal away every room and forbade anyone from telling these family stories out loud. Ironically enough, she's the one death nobody in this family ever dressed up. Now she's gone, unstoried, and her daughter is 17, pregnant at 17, and the last of her own siblings left standing, because 2 of the deaths in this house are Edith's own older brothers, Lewis from the cannery and Milton, the door painted on a wall. So it's not much of a mystery what she reaches for. She reopens that sealed house and turns 100 years of hard truth into something beautiful. A whole journal written in whimsy to the son that she is carrying. Get it? What she's carrying? Because she dies giving birth to him in 2017. That journal is the only thing Christopher will ever have of her. A mother deciding, in the time she's got, what he inherits instead of her. And she's doing exactly what her great-grandmother did. There are 2 Ediths in this house. The elder, Edie, who told the dragon story instead of the collapsed slide and authored this family's whole mythology for decades, and her great-granddaughter named Edith after her. 2 of them, decades apart, and by the end, I don't think they're separate people so much as 2 instances of the same force. The one that keeps insisting that these deaths have to mean something, whether or not anyone's still alive with the material to make that true. Edie writes the myths. Edith inherits the compulsion to keep writing them, without most of the material to keep it going. It's almost like a Father, Son, Holy Spirit type of thing if you squint really hard, or maybe like a really fucked up version of Encanto. You have 2 persons, one force, running this family for a century under a name we only call the curse or the gift. See, and it's Encanto, because nothing more accurate just ever stuck. They got a fucked up house too. I don't think that excuses anything. I think that it explains it. And there's one more death that even that force couldn't reach, and that's Edie's own. She dies at 93, alcohol and her own prescription medication. And this was never some distant figure to Edith. She had a real grandmother, the 2 of them photographed together at Edie's 90th birthday. What Edith never got was that deep mythology itself. The last night she's ever in that house, Dawn and Edie are downstairs fighting over whether Edith's even allowed to know any of it. And Edith sent off from the table, slips into a sealed up library and finds a book that Edie left just for her. The story of the night that Edith was born, when the lowest tide in 1,000 years pulled the water back, and Edie saw the old sunken house for the only time in her life. Before Edith reaches the end, Dawn takes the book. It tears in her hands, and they leave that same night. Edie is found dead the next morning. In my headcanon, a woman who spent her whole life turning everyone else's deaths into something beautiful had one waiting for herself too. Swept away mid-gesture, a myth of her own making. But she doesn't get it in the book. There's no mythical dragon named Percocet or whatever Finchian version of that would be. The one person who never once let a death go unstoried is the one death, or one of the few deaths, that doesn't get one. And that's the tension none of them ever resolve. Like the photos of Sam's final hunting trip, every one of these stories is doing multiple things at once. It celebrates the person. Sven becomes a man who fought a dragon, not a man who built a slide that fell on him. And there's real love in that. It warns the kids, look what happened to Lewis. Look what happened to Calvin. This is why you always leave a note. And it's cope. It lets the family feel something about the loss without it ever sitting in unbearable specifics. But none of them require anyone to actually change anything. You celebrate the dead, you warn the kids, you comfort yourself with a good story, generation after generation, forever and ever, without once asking, why do so many Finches keep dying in ways that trace back to the same handful of untreated problems? The stories do everything except the one thing that would actually break this pattern. And I think that's the whole reason my own kids can't really relate to this game. Not because I raised them right in some tidy, teachable way, but because at least like right now, they're so materially removed from the experiences that make this game so easy for me to sit here and analyze my past experiences. That's a difference in the conditions of their lives. It's not a story that I told to protect them or a reason that I told them to leave the fridge closed. Edie's family told better and better stories for 100 years, but it doesn't seem like once they ever tried to change the material conditions around them. And I want to believe, albeit cautiously, that changing the conditions is literally the whole difference. So this is where I land on this whole game. The Finch curse was never dying. Everybody dies. The curse was the story, or specifically, the power that the story held over this family. A family so busy mythologizing death that they actually forgot to live. Edie's obsession with death is the exact same thing that kept her from living, and the universe just kind of shrugged and agreed with her. And this has a name, and it's not mine. Ernest Becker, in The Denial of Death, said cultures build what he calls immortality projects to keep mortality at arm's length. The Finch house is just one of these projects. They built the graveyard before they built a wall. So was a golden order in Elden Ring, for what it's worth. So I'll do the one thing that no Finch in this entire family tree could ever bring themselves to do. I'll say the plain word. Suicide, neglect, addiction. And the family renders every single one of those facts as wonder. The whimsy isn't the cure here, the whimsy is part of the symptoms. The family that mythologized its own mental illness for 100 years because it couldn't look at its own dead straight on. The very first thing this family ever told itself, the house that sailed an ocean, a curse with perfect aim, that was already a fairy tale. The unreliable narration goes all the way down to the keel, like the rot is in the foundations. And that's why I told you at the very start that this isn't a scary game. The horrors that take place are in reality very mundane and very real and normal. And I think that's the real horror because so much of it is just true. And Gregory is probably the starkest instance of all of this. You already know how this goes by now, like not even 2 years old, and it comes down to a few unwatched minutes. And I want to say the obvious thing first. obviously you don't leave a child unattended in a bath. Like, it was one of the most evocative emotional reactions I saw out of my 12-year-old was a baby being left in a bath, which is a very good thing, obviously. But look at what Edith does with it, like inside the fiction itself. You have a toy frog, water that turns into an entire world, a kid who gets to spend his very last seconds not scared and not alone, but delighted, seeing something in that bathtub that the rest of us grown-ups have long lost the ability to see. She can't undo what actually happened to him. The real facts are still sitting there in the documentation for anyone who goes looking at that death certificate. But inside the one place she has any control, the story, the baby who never got a single choice in his whole life gets, at minimum, one good final moment. And it's not only her that's doing that. It's both of them. It's Edith's grandmother and granddaughter, reaching for whimsy as the coping mechanism itself across multiple generations of this specific loss. Let's go back to the Winchester Mystery House down in San Jose. Once again, we have a grieving widow, an endlessly sprawling, architecturally insane house, a curse about appeasing the ghost of everyone ever killed by a Winchester rifle, except the curse story is mostly manufactured. People who actually knew her described her as sharp, financially savvy, and not remotely superstitious. Construction stopped all the time. The famous staircase to nowhere is earthquake damage. The door that opens to a 40-foot drop was a materials hoist for construction crews. The full haunted curse version got built by the people running it as a tourist attraction after she died. Because myth is more powerful and more profitable than wealthy widow did an unusually long home renovation. Take the mysticism out of almost any of these stories, and what's actually left is just negligence, bad luck, bad timing, grief, loss, all of it dressed up as fate, including maybe even the story that I opened this video with. Not me going to Orcas Island, I really went there. Like in the opening of this video, I said that they were brilliant and talented in every aspect, but they were crushed by their own demons. And in hindsight, it was never necessarily a neutral fact that this game handed me. That might just be Edith Jr.'s own framing, doing exactly what it was built to do. She was the one writing all of this, don't forget that, and she wanted her son, and every player after her son, to remember this family as luminous and cursed, instead of ordinary and unwell. And I mean, she succeeded. We're still talking about it now. It succeeded on me. Why would she need to do that, though? Now, why would she need to do that? There's an old idea that you actually die twice. Once when your body stops, and a second time much later. It's the last time anyone ever says your name, or the last trace of you disappears completely. The same engine as Becker's immortality projects, just running in a smaller, sadder key. Immortality doesn't need a graveyard, or a golden order. It can just be making sure that somebody somewhere wrote you down. If that's the fear underneath all of this mythologizing, it goes deeper than avoiding grief. It's about refusing to let this family's second death happen on her watch. If you're remembered, written down, documented, proof that you were actually here, it can't have all been for nothing. Even a family this sad gets to be beautiful in the retelling. And beautiful means that it doesn't disappear. And I get that fear for what it's worth. I mean, I don't want my kids to forget me either, obviously. But I think there's a real difference between wanting to be remembered honestly and needing to be remembered so beautifully that the truth just gets buried just to make room for said beauty. Edie and then Edith chose the second one every time. And I think that's the actual cost of this curse. Right at the exact point this video stops being about them and starts being more about me. So usually by this point, when we hit the conclusion, most videos like these want to land on a clean solve. Here's what the game means, tied up in a neat little bow. And I don't think I can do that here. And the longer I sat with it, to be quite honest, I didn't really want to. Every single conclusion that I reached about this family just opened up like 3 more questions underneath it. And I realized that that was something that I missed so much. It feels like nowadays that's not how finishing a game usually feels. But that's the exact same feeling that I had finishing this game and also recently finishing 1000X Resist. The second that I started putting words to page, it's just like everything washed over me and it became something that I'm still arguing with myself about. And I don't think that that's a flaw in this essay. I think that that is part of the point in a story that is really honest about how messy most of us really are. Oh my god. All right. I just realized we've been at this house a while now, and I have barely touched Dawn and Sanjay's own household, like the actual day-to-day family of Lewis, Milton, and Edith. Because remember, Edith lost both of her older brothers and ended up leaving the home, getting pregnant at 17, and dying. Like, I want to know what happened. Like, there's enough there for its own deep dive. And I think that it's just so awesome that a 2-hour game can generate this many threads that I don't have the bandwidth to cover today. I think that might be the point of a story this honest about how messy people really are. Okay, so it's been like 40 minutes now, and I realized that I never even talked about my daughter's thoughts about this game. That was the whole point of me having her play it. And so, all right, here's what she said. She came downstairs. She said she finished the game. I, very excitedly, put my stuff down, gave her my full attention, asked her how it was. She looked at me and she told me it was fine. No big themes, no meditation on inherited grief, nothing about generational trauma. To her, it's just a story about a weird, messed up family, full stop. And she is not that far off from the age that Edith was when she left home and started her own journey. Two girls at very similar ages, and they can't see each other because it's just completely different realities. So here's the analysis of her analysis. My daughter thinks that this is just a weird story about a weird family that have some mildly funny deaths in it. And she thinks that it is weird and funny and a little bit clown-worthy for me to sit here and spiral about this game for literally half the runtime of the game itself. And you know what? Maybe that means that I'm doing something right. So the Finch kids were soaked in doom, generation after generation. My kids met a game about an entire century of it, and they just kind of shrugged. That distance, that's the cycle partially being broken. I didn't break it with a lesson, it broke because their childhood is far enough from all of it that the whole thing is just fiction, just pure fiction. And I'll be honest too, like, I've yelled at my kids, I've made extremely bad calls, I am nowhere close to a model parent. But even in my imperfectness, the floor of this house, my actual house, is so far from that house of doom, my kids can't find the door. And that's also part of the reason I make these videos at all. Like, to me, they are little time capsules or little diary entries. Someday my kids will come back to them when they're adults and they'll learn things about me that they never knew or they never made the connections to. The same way that my daughter might come back to this game 10, 20 years later and finally see everything I've been talking about for nearly an hour. But right now, most of it flew over her head, and I'm okay with that.